When I tried to protect my wife, my son pushed me away so his wife could hit her. That day, I decided, they'll pay for every humiliation they gave us. I hear the sound before I see the hand, an open-palmed slap that cracks like a dropped plate in a quiet kitchen. My wife tilts with it. Her hair, once black, now thinned and gone soft with age, lifts at the ends and settles back against her cheek. She doesn't cry out. She never does. She just inhales, as if the hurt has entered through her skin and needs somewhere to go. "Mom, stop making a scene," my son says. It's his voice, calm, embarrassed, like the one he used in high school when he would beg me to drop him at the corner so his friends wouldn't see him step out of his father's old car. He's taller than me now and well-fed, his chin shaved smooth, his shirt clean and ironed. He looks like a bank manager or a realtor, someone who knows where he is going. I used to imagine him as a surgeon when he slept on my chest as a boy. The quick little breaths, the warm weight of him, a promise I believed in more than God. "Don't you dare talk back," his wife says, heat still burning in her voice. "After everything we do for you people." She says you people, like we are guests who forgot our shoes on in the prayer room. I step forward and he pushes me. My son, hand flat against my chest, easy and sudden, as one nudges a door shut, not rough enough to leave a mark, but rough enough to place me where he wants me, back against the counter, away from my wife, who is smaller each year, and smaller now, shrinking as if she is apologizing with her whole body. "Dad," he says, warning in the single word, "please, don't make it worse." I look at him and then at her, at the way her left hand rubs the edge of her apron like a memory tick. The kitchen lights are too bright, an icy white, and the sun on the winter morning outside is pale as milk. The cutlery drawer hums from where my hip jostled it. I can smell dish soap and the faint sharp edge of bleach. I can hear the refrigerator motor and the delicate glass chime we bought for our old porch years ago, tinkling in the wind someone lets in when they open the back door. The ordinary sounds of a family. "Enough," I say, my voice low because anything louder will break inside me. "Don't touch her." "Your wife," my daughter-in-law says, and the words slide out like something she keeps in her mouth for moments like this, needs to learn where she stands in this house. "It's our house," I say, and the room stares back at me as if I'm the one lying. "We bought it. We let you move in when you needed a place. We didn't mind you living in the bigger room because you said you would help." He shakes his head. It's the small shake of someone who has decided the conversation is over. "Things have changed, Dad." Things. That small, busy word that can carry whole lives out of the room. I don't remember deciding to move again. I only realize I have when my son's hand is on my chest a second time, firmer, guiding me back. I am 58 and still stronger than people think, but I've never been one to use my strength on my family. My wife reaches for me, two quick fingers that find my sleeve and try to close over it, and my daughter-in-law's wrist flashes as if she is swatting a fly. The edge of her bracelet catches my wife's knuckles. A thin whip of skin opens. Not much blood. Not much sound. Enough. The tiny metal bird on the chime outside keeps singing as I put my palm over my wife's hand. "I'm sorry," my wife says, looking down like she's apologizing to the floor. She always says sorry to the wrong things. She apologized to the stove when it broke, and to the rain when it ruined the line-dried laundry. I've told her 100 times that life is not a person you owe. That morning, I understood what true loneliness felt like. Not the loneliness of an empty room, the loneliness of standing in your own kitchen, with your son breathing your air, and realizing you are a guest in the life you built. I took my wife out of that house. I don't remember putting on my coat or finding her purse, or how the door sounded behind us, if it slammed or closed quietly. if the chime sang once more, or if the wind died. I only remember the small weight of her hand in mine, and the cold, and the way her breath came in a thin ribbon as we walked toward the bus stop, our feet on the damp brown leaves that the city never seems to collect after the first snow. On the bus, she leaned her shoulder into me as she has done since she was a girl and I was a boy, newly learning the size of my own hands. I was too angry to be gentle, too stunned to be safe. I stared at my reflection in the window, the old man with the tired eyes staring back, and tried to find my son in my own face. He's in there somewhere, the baby who grabbed my finger and wouldn't let go. He's in there with all the versions of me who promised him the moon and then went to work instead. We got off near the park because I didn't know where else to go. The benches were cold, and birds picked at nothing in the grass, their heads cocked like they were listening to a story just out of earshot. My wife's cheek had pinked where she'd been slapped. I wanted to put my lips to it like you do with babies, kiss the hurt away, as if flesh could be convinced. "Let's go to the clinic," I said. "It's just a sting," she said. She tried to smile, but her mouth wasn't in the mood. We didn't go back that day. Or the next. We found a room not far away, one of those rooms that look like an apology. A coil spring bed, a sink that coughs, a window that remembers what glass was like before they made it good. I signed the paper with my name, and the woman who took our money looked me over like I was asking for her daughter. My wife folded our clothes into careful stacks, as if the neatness of our corners could change the shape of the world. At night I lay listening to the hallway, and all the lives stacked around us. The television through the wall. A baby's sneeze. Someone laughing and then coughing, and then laughing again. I've never been a heavy sleeper. When time is busy with its knives, it is a poor idea to close your eyes and trust it to behave. During the days I went looking for work, the kind you don't need a resume for, the kind paid in cash, as if the exchange is a secret. A man I knew from my years at the plant let me sit at the security desk in a warehouse on the east side. "Night shift," he said. "Easy. Keep the log. Wear the jacket. People will nod at you." I nodded back at him. If you look like a corner of the room, people forget you were ever a window. In the early mornings, when other men came home and put their feet up and watched the news and yawned at the exact same minute they yawned the day before, I walked back through the thin cold to our room, bringing my wife a paper cup of coffee and a small bag with a warm roll in it. The city looked honest at that hour. The streets weren't pretending to be anything but streets. The light was a low gray that didn't try to be beautiful, and ended up being beautiful anyway. She would take the coffee in both hands and hold it to her chest like a hot water bottle. "You should sleep," she'd say. "I will," I'd say. "Soon." On Sundays we walked. We kept our hands in our pockets and told our feet where to go. There is a way the sun lands on brick buildings in winter, a kind of shy yellow, like a child told to speak up. We found a bench in a pocket of light and shared a sandwich. We didn't talk about our son. Or we did, but in the way people talk about the weather after a storm. "What a thing," I would say. "What a thing," she would agree. And then we would say nothing, because the world was already too crowded with words. Sometimes, when I sat at the warehouse desk and the ticking of the wall clock sounded like someone tapping a spoon against my skull, I would see the kitchen again, the white light, the thin cut on my wife's knuckles, the set of my son's jaw. I would feel a heat that lived behind my eyes and nowhere else. "They'll pay for every humiliation," I whispered once, testing the sentence like a key in a lock. It didn't feel cruel in my mouth. It felt like when you straighten a picture on the wall. Not vengeance, just the sound of something finding its level. Then the winter found its heavy boots. Everything squeaked, snow under tires, snow under feet, snow under the sadness that sat on my chest like an obedient cat. I took a second job on weekends, cleaning offices empty of the people who used them. I learned the personalities of wastebaskets. Some eat like birds, some like wolves. My hands smelled of lemon and ammonia. I came home to my wife, who had taught herself the trick of sleeping while waiting, and we would count the coins on the table and smile at each other as if there were more than there were. She started coughing. The small, dry cough of a throat tired of swallowing unsaid things. It made me listen harder when she slept, tuning myself to the sound of her breath the way you tune a radio, the dial delicate in your fingers, the static like a hand over your mouth. It was on one of those days, when the cold had finally gotten bored of itself, and the wind decided to take a nap, that the envelope came. I almost didn't see it. It was black and white among the flyers shoved under our door. A pizza place, a church newsletter, a notice about a missing dog that wears a sweater, and then this envelope with an embossed seal like someone had leaned a ring into wax. My name was written the way it is on the deed of our house, not the way the bank writes it, the way I wrote it when I was young and sure of the shape of my life. Inside were 2 sheets of paper, cream thick, with a letter I read twice before I breathed. We had lived for 27 years in that house, paid it off slow until the day the bank sent us a final paper with a cheerful stamp, and I kissed my wife's knuckles, where the skin over the bones is thin as rice paper. When my son and his wife moved in, just for a while, they said, until they found a place that had light like our kitchen. We did what parents do. We changed our habits. We said use our room. We said take the car, we can take the bus. We said what we always say, because love is a language with tameness in it. During those months, the city had begun a redevelopment project in our area. Old homes, small and stubborn, were being bought out. New buildings were sprouting up, with balconies like teeth. We got some notice then that a committee would evaluate property values. I'd skimmed an early letter at the time and put it aside, the way you do with things that feel like they belong to someone else's life. This new letter, though, was different. It was from a lawyer whose name I don't know how to say. European-looking, tight-lipped, and it said, in words careful as a surgeon, that because the title of our house remained in my wife's name and mine, and because the city's committee had concluded their work, a significant compensation, he called it a redevelopment consideration, was approved for the owners. The amount made my heart stumble. I've never been a man attracted to big numbers. Small numbers are steady and true. A big number can look at you like a stray dog looks at a hand, hopeful, suspicious. It was the kind of number you don't say aloud in a room like the one we were living in. It felt rude, like taking off your boots on someone else's carpet and setting them on the couch. There was more, a note that approvals required our live signatures, in person, no proxies, no transfers without original wet ink names. The letter listed a date for a meeting at the lawyer's office, Monday, 10 a.m. Bring identification. Bring your marriage certificate. Bring yourself. I put the letter down and picked it up again. My fingers left no oil on the quality paper. I heard the hallway outside our door, someone arguing softly, someone dragging a suitcase, someone dropping a bag of groceries and apples rolling across the scuffed floor. I thought of my son and his wife in our kitchen, of their hands on our pots and pans, of their keys on our hook by the door, of their words in our air. I thought of what it would do to a person to see their gravy run in a direction they didn't intend. I looked at my wife. She was seated on the bed, folding and refolding a worn towel, the kind we bought bulk when we were newly married, the kind that take years to give up. I held the letter like a candle into her face. The light in her eyes when she read it, I have seen that light twice before. Once the day our son took his first steps between us, the wobble and then the laugh that bubbled hard from his chest. And once the evening we carried the last box into our house and set it down and sat with our backs against the wall, eating sandwiches cross-legged on the floor between the echo of empty rooms. "Well," she said, and then again, "Well." There are some moments in a life that split it cleanly into before and after. When a doctor says a word you don't want to hear. When a door closes behind someone who doesn't come back. When a boy you raised places his palm on your chest to move you out of the way of your wife's pain. And sometimes, the split comes from the scratch of a lawyer's name at the bottom of a letter. I didn't sleep the night before the meeting. I shaved. I ironed a shirt under a towel because we didn't have an iron. I put our marriage certificate in a plastic sleeve I borrowed from the man in 3B who collects baseball cards. I told my wife we would walk the long way so we could pass the bakery with the window that is always fogged up and see the baskets of loaves stacked like kindling. When we walked into the lawyer's office, the carpet smelled expensive, new but pretending to be old. The receptionist wore a neutral smile. The lawyer was shorter than his name. He had kind eyes and a watch that looked like it knew what it was doing. "You're early," he said, as if that were an achievement. "Good." He explained things. I listened like a man who was about to take apart and reassemble something delicate. There would be a preliminary payment and then a final one. They would place the funds into a temporary account for us. We would sign here and here and here. My wife's hand trembled a little as she wrote, but not enough to change the spelling of her name. He spoke about timelines, and he spoke about fairness, and he spoke about the city's obligation to make right what it had made inconvenient. I nodded, and the watch on his wrist nodded at mine, a tiny private meeting between timekeepers. Before we left, he looked at us over the tops of his glasses. "We received a call last week," he said, casual as if he were mentioning the weather. "A young man claimed to be your son. He wanted to know if he could sign for you. He said you were unwell and old." He hesitated as if deciding whether to deliver a joke. I told him that is not how we do things. My wife's jaw buttoned tight. I felt it again, that sensation of a picture finding its level on the wall, that drop into a place that belongs. I handed the man my card, the one with my night job number on it. "If anyone calls again," I said, "tell them their obligations are older than their appetite." The preliminary payment came like a quiet storm, not the kind with a brass band. The kind that soaks the ground so deep you can plant a whole new garden in the morning. I had to sit with it. Numbers should not be left alone. They can get into trouble. I changed our room before I changed anything else. A place with 2 windows, a heater that doesn't sigh like it's giving up. I bought my wife a lavender blanket with a border of small stitched flowers, and she ran her hand along it like she was learning a new language. We ate hot meals, fish and greens and rice that doesn't clump. I bent my back, took a breath, and straightened it again like a man remembering he is taller than he has been acting. I didn't tell my son, not yet. We waited for the final payment in an apartment that smelled, for the first time in months, like the inside of a life. I got my wife the cough syrup she liked. We took our walks. We spoke about ordinary things, the way joy is best behaved when you don't challenge it to perform. Then I called him. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Dad," my son said, and I had to steady my voice against the memory of him saying that word when he was small and had an uncompromised mouth. "Where have you been? You left without... You hit your mother," I said. "I didn't hit anyone. She was being... You allowed your wife to hit your mother," I said, adjusting the sentence so it didn't let him out of what he did. Adjustments matter. Life hides in them. He was silent. In the background I could hear a television, a sports game, the quick clapping noise of many hands that don't know each other. "Come home," he said finally. "Let's talk." "I will come," I said, "but not to talk." To tell you what will happen next, I hung up then, because I've learned that the last word is not the last word. It's just the last word for now. We went on a Tuesday. The sun had an April mood. Wind, then calm. Warmth, then a little bite to remind you not to trust it until it has earned your trust. My old house. Our house. I knew it before I saw it by the sound of the metal gate. The paint was peeling in the places I knew it would peel. The front step still had the slight dip in the middle from years of feet and rain and waiting. I put my hand on the railing and felt the memory of my skin there. He opened the door and looked at me like you look at a problem you thought you'd solved. My daughter-in-law hovered over his shoulder and folded her arms with military precision. "We made tea," he said, thoughtful, as if tea were the correct currency for debts like ours. We sat at the table, the same table. A little more scratched, a ring where someone had set a pot without a pad. My wife sat with her hands on her lap and stared at the kettle because it was something to look at that wouldn't betray her. "I'm sorry," my son said. The words felt like stones in his mouth. They hit the table and didn't break. "Are you?" I said. A question, because a question is sometimes a better tool than a statement. It has a sharp point. He shrugged. "Things are hard. We're under pressure. The market is." "Things," I said. That word again, cheap as a plastic fork. His wife pushed a plate across the table toward me. The small, careful cookie she makes when she wants to pretend she is a soft person. "We've been paying the utilities," she said, "and fixing the leak, and mowing the yard. It isn't cheap." "You used our car," I said, my tone flat as a road. "You used our bed. You used our kitchen. You used our good pans with the thick bottoms." She sniffed, a sound like someone testing a perfume. "It was your duty." I laughed. It surprised me that it felt good, like stretching after a long sit. "No," I said. "Duty runs both ways, or it isn't duty. It's slavery." I took the papers from my bag. The envelope the lawyer had given me, the stamped letter, the account statement with the preliminary deposit, the schedule for final payment. I laid them on the table like a dealer laying down a hand he knows will fold the room. They both leaned in. I watched their faces do arithmetic. I saw what hope looks like in a mouth that doesn't have the right to it. "Because the house is in our names," I said, not unkindly, "the compensation is ours, not yours." "That money," my son said, swallowing his disappointment like a tiny animal he wasn't sure would sit well, "could help us all." We will help," I said, "but not the way you imagine." He looked at me as if his father had been replaced by a stranger while he slept. "You'll pay the arrears you've left in our name," I went on, and slid a printed list of bills forward. The water fee 6 months late. The property tax his wife understood the magic of ignoring. The notice from the Homeowners Association with its polite threat and embossed crest. "You'll repay what you've spent from our accounts." I have the statements. I did. I had sat with them one evening under the lamp, circling withdrawals like I was studying weather patterns. "You'll sign this agreement that you will vacate this house in 30 days. We will sell it. You will not obstruct the process. You will not threaten or insult your mother again. You will not visit us unless your hands are not empty of apology." My daughter-in-law laughed. It was a hard sound. "Who do you think you are? We live here. You live here because we opened the door," I said, and the chime outside the back door gave a single, soft breath, as if to agree with me. "We can close it." My son's chest worked like a fish. "This is revenge." "No," I said, and felt a stillness take its position in me. "Revenge would be to forget you entirely. Justice is to ask you to carry what you've put down on us." He stood. The old chair legs made their old familiar squeal on the old floor. He paced to the counter and back. He looked at his wife and then at me. I saw the boy in him that cried when he fell on the driveway and skinned his knee, and I promised him he'd always have me. The problem with promises is that they do not know how to die on their own. "We can go to court," his wife said, chin up. "We can claim—" "You can claim what you like," I said, and spread my hands, empty. "We have the deeds. We have the law. And we have time," I tapped the envelope. "And we have this lawyer who is very fond of rules." There is a point during a confrontation when the other party decides whether they want to drag you into the mud or lean against the fence and talk like humans. It's not a rational decision. It's a weather change. I saw the clouds in my son's face shift. "What do you want from me?" he asked, as if the simplest question had just arrived at a door he knew but had never knocked. "Say I'm sorry to your mother," I said. Meaning it, not like a child sulking about his vegetables. Meaning it like a man who has discovered he isn't the center of the room he stands in. "Then sign this. Then start putting your life where you want it, instead of inside ours." He turned to her. My wife. The woman who taught him to tie his shoes by making up a song about rabbits and holes. He looked at the knuckles he had watched knead dough and coin his name from a dark corner when he cried under the blankets during a thunderstorm. He swallowed, and for the first time in my presence, he bowed his head. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, voice low, aluminum against wood. My wife nodded once. Nothing dramatic, the still nod of a person whose dignity is not for sale. She didn't cry, because she had already done her crying in places where crying is not a crime. He signed the paper. His wife signed too, her mouth set like a line drawn with a ruler. I put the papers back in the envelope and felt a small lift behind my ribs. Not joy. Something quieter. A chair placed under a window. A light turned off because the sun has decided it will be enough. We left the house. I touched the railing again and told it in my head to be good to whoever came next. The wind was busy with the chime, and for a moment it sounded like laughter. It happened quickly, everything after. The final compensation arrived. We sold the house to a woman with neat handwriting and a calm baby. We moved to a smaller place near the river, where the path curves under sycamore trees, and you can hear the water arguing with the rocks in a voice that somehow makes everything you own feel safe. I bought a sturdy chair and put it by the window. My wife sits in it, late in the day, with her new blanket over her knees, and hums under her breath while she reads. I work fewer hours now. I still take the early walk some mornings because the city has a particular kindness before it wakes. We put money aside, not because we are greedy, but because we know the mouths of time. We gave to the shelter where we spent a strange week 2 winters ago, and I handed the man there a stack of soft towels and watched his face as if I were feeding a better country. My son called once to ask if he might come by with his children. His voice had grown in extra carefulness. I said yes. He came. The children were loud, with the good kind of loudness. My wife gave them cookies and wiped their mouths with a corner of her sleeve, and told them the story of the time a blue balloon lifted itself over a building, and our boy, my son, ran laughing down the block after it until he fell and then laughed at the sky. When he stood by the door to leave, he rubbed the small scar on his chin, the one he got the same day, and said, "Dad, I am trying." "I know," I said. I didn't place my hand on his shoulder. I don't believe in forcing a moment to be more than it is. I don't believe in pretending you can rewind without noticing where the tape is spliced. He looked at me with eyes that were mine and not mine. "Thank you," he said. And then he surprised us both by turning to his mother and putting his hands around her hands and kissing the air above them like the boy who used to love his own dignity enough to be tender. After they left, my wife and I sat without talking for a while, the kind of silence that is crowded with good things. Outside the window, the river leaned into its work. The sun taught the surfaces of the world to say please and thank you. A woman passing on the path below laughed into her phone, and it sounded like a promise I hadn't made yet. That night, when the room had given the day back to the dark, I lay awake and pressed my tongue to the back of my teeth and tasted the metal of memory. I thought about that day in the kitchen, how it had narrowed my life to a single point I imagined I could not survive. How that point had turned out to be a doorway on a hinge I didn't know was there. They'll pay for every humiliation, I had told myself. I don't feel the need to say it now. They paid. Not in shame, and not in punishment. In necessary, honest coins. Apologies made, doors closed and opened with proper respect, bills settled, names signed, rooms vacated. Decency borrowed and returned with interest. Justice isn't a flame. It is a level line where the water meets the shore. I am not a vengeful man. I have been broken and mended and broken again. I learned that day in the kitchen that love without boundaries is not love. It is an invitation for people to forget themselves. And I learned in the months that followed that dignity is a house you can build from very little. A chair by a window, a warm blanket, the habit of waking early and speaking softly to the morning. If you are listening to this and you know the taste of humiliation as well as you know your own name, hear me. Do not rush to punish. Do not feed anger with your whole hand. Make the calls. Keep the records. Find the letter you put aside because you thought it belonged to someone else's life. Show up early to the office where people speak the language of signatures. Say what happened in sentences that don't wobble. Ask for what is yours. Then go home and eat with the person who held your hand through all of it. Sit by the window with your chair angled just so. Learn to enjoy the small quiet that comes after a long loud. It is a better music than any chime. Some nights, I take the long walk to the old street. The house looks good with new paint and a bicycle on the porch. I don't go up to the door. I don't need to. I stand at the gate and listen for the faintest sound of the chime, and sometimes, if the wind is in a mood to be kind, I hear it. Not a bell, not a trumpet, just a small, ordinary singing that says, "You did not fail. You were simply asked to remember what you already knew." I hold my wife's hand as we walk back along the river, our steps making that soft human rhythm that sounds like a room being tidied after a party. We pass under the sycamores and the last light turns the water into a small country of gold. I think of my son's bowed head. I think of the weight of the envelope that changed the way the days felt in my hand. I think of the way the world gives you exactly enough sometimes, if you are willing to sit with the order of things and not demand a miracle. I am an old man speaking to you now, but I had to become older to find out what courage looks like after humiliation. It looks like staying gentle while you draw a line. It looks like loving the person you promised to love when no one is taking attendance. It looks like folding a blanket over a pair of knees and knowing that there are softer victories worth earning. Did this story touch your heart? Tell me where you're listening from. I read every comment.